Welcome back to A Year of Final Fantasy, and we are in the month of Ramu. Now, last time I mistakenly said that this was going to be the penultimate episode, that is the second to last episode in this month of Ramu. That is actually not the case. The way that the weeks fall in the month, we're going to be getting 9 episodes this month, so I guess look forward to a extra episode, and then at the end of next week, we'll go and talk about Final Fantasy III. And that'll be really fun. But I did want to get this jobs video before we got to Final Fantasy III because it plays a major role from here on out. Even though these jobs did first appear in Final Fantasy I, we'll see how the job system itself starts to really take a shape and form of its own to define the franchise in the way that it does. So at the beginning of this month, we started off with Jobs Part 1, and I initially was going to do the 6 major jobs of Final Fantasy, but it turned out to kind of snowball in on itself, and I could only really talk about the first 3 and keep it to a time frame that I wanted. So now we're going to be looking at the last 3 jobs, which are going to be the magic-focused jobs. And there's some really interesting stuff I found here that I personally was not aware of, so let's go ahead and jump right into that. So I call these jobs the Holy Sextet, and that's not a dirty word, for the Final Fantasy franchise. There's 6 major jobs, and right now we're going to be talking about the last 3, like I said, the mage job. What really sets the franchise apart is their groupings of use of magic. At the simplest form, there are basically 2 kinds of magic, black magic and white magic. Black magic being destructive and white magic being curative and protective, although they do have a little bit of destructive potency on their own. So obviously black mages use, well, they use black magic, duh. I'll do another topic on the magic itself and how it's kind of arranged in Final Fantasy, but right now, we're not going to go into the specifics of the types of black magic spells and white magic spells and all of that. Black mages are usually depicted with a rather dark blue cloak and a pointy wizard-like hat, and basically they have no face, they just have these 2 peering yellow eyes. Now, some of the notable black mages are Final Fantasy IX's Vivi. Like, everyone knows Vivi, everyone loves Vivi. He's easily the most popular black mage of the series. Others of note are Final Fantasy IV's Rydia, at least at the beginning. I guess you can call her really a hybrid, but she does use black magic. Palom is Final Fantasy IV's classic black mage, part of a duo there. Final Fantasy X's black mage is clearly Lulu. And one deep cut that I found into the obscure lore of the novelization of Final Fantasy, which I talked about in another video. The novelization is called Memory of Heroes. The black mage is actually given the name Daewoo, and that's the black mage from the original Final Fantasy. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of something interesting that I ran into. Alright, so let's go ahead and move away from black mages to white mages, and you probably have no clue what they use. Well, obviously it's white magic. To be fair though, like I said, not all white magic is protective or healing. There are some things that hurt enemies, and there's actually some magics that flip-flop back and forth between white magic and black magic, which is kind of weird. Notably, Aero, A-E-R-O, that has been seen in both. The harming magic of white magic is the fact that Holy is there. Holy is usually a fairly powerful spell. Curative spells used on undead enemies also will kill them. Some notable white mages are Final Fantasy II's Minwu, Final Fantasy IV's Rosa, probably one of my favorite, Porum, which is Palom's twin, so we have a white mage and a black mage. They're twins. I really enjoy their dynamic. Though not explicitly stated, Final Fantasy VII's Eris is clearly a white mage. There's no arguing that, I don't think. Final Fantasy IX's white mage is kind of loosely tied to Princess Garnet and Dagger, if you want to call her that. At the beginning of the game, you actually see Dagger running around, or Princess Garnet running around in a white mage robe. I thought that was incredibly clever. Eiko, or Aiko, however you want to say her name, she also has white magic. Both Dagger and Eiko, or Aiko, are hybrid summoner white mages, so it's kind of a toss-up there. If you really want to stretch the definition, Final Fantasy XV's Luna Freya, I believe, would be based after a white mage, and she is called an oracle, and that is a proper Final Fantasy class, so I don't know, it's kind of a toss-up. Anyway, Like Black Mage in the Memory of Heroes novelization, we do have the White Mage, and she is given the name Floe, F-L-O-E. And now we can move on from White Mage, and you probably ask, well, what's the red magic? Red magics are actually, it's really a cop-out. It's just white and black magic together. They make red magic. And I've actually talked about why I think this is due to some influence from Dragonlance, maybe. You can see that in the original Final Fantasy video that I talked about. Red mages themselves, they can just simply wield both black magic and white magic, though at a reduced capacity. To make up the deficit, they're actually also fairly decent at fighting. They're your generic jack of all trades, master of none, and red mages are my personal favorite mages in Final Fantasy. Decided that they're putting them in Final Fantasy XIV, but that's way far off in the distance. Also, probably the most important part about red mages are that they are the most stylish out of the bunch. Of any Final Fantasy class, I will fight anyone with that statement. They basically wear a pimp outfit with a red stylish hat with a white feather in it. So red mages, they are top of the tier on the fashion totem pole in Final Fantasy. And as awesome as red mages are, most games really only reference them, which is just a shame. None are real protagonists in any meaningful way, at least not that I can think of off the top of my head. Now, I may run into something later on in which a red mage is a very, very big character, but just right now, as I do research on this, I can't really think of any red mage that takes center stage. Now, there are a few standouts of red mages though, just like white mages and black mages. Final Fantasy III, the DS opening, has Ingus sporting the red mage attire, which we'll get to that in a little bit. A few of them can be seen as NPCs in Final Fantasy IX. Of course, those aren't, necessarily standouts, but you do see him in Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy XI had a quest following the death of Ranimard, an elven red mage, so that's, a named red mage, that's good. Strangely enough, Julius from Final Fantasy Adventure wears the red mage attire. Now, we did talk about Final Fantasy Adventure in another video, so you should definitely check that out. And yet another deep cut, something that we haven't talked about yet. Final Fantasy I's manga has the red mage named probably the most badass name in the series. Now, prepare yourself, okay? Just take a minute, center yourself. Okay, the red mage in Final Fantasy I, his name is Puffy.
Puffy.
Guys, I don't know. I think that's enough interneting for me today. Yeah, that's enough. Anyway, those are the three major magic using classes of the Final Fantasy sextet jobs. So now we have a solid foundation of the Final Fantasy jobs in general. This is not going to be the end of the jobs video. There are tons of Final Fantasy jobs out there, and the ways that those jobs are implemented in different game systems that we will talk a lot more about. So this is only the second video in this jobs sub-series, so definitely keep out an eye for more of those as we go further into the new games. Right now, we do have an extra video, like I said, coming next week in the month of Ramuh. I have an idea of what that's going to be, but I'll just save that and let you be surprised. And then at the end of next week, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy III. I cannot wait to talk about this game. It is awesome, especially if you like the jobs and the job systems in the Final Fantasy games. So until next time, Crystal Warriors, keep on gaming.